The first time I called my boss ma'am, she laughed right in my face. I thought it was just a joke, but I didn't realize then how that one moment would change everything between us. I still remember the first morning I met her. The office was quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of hush that settles before the day really begins. The hum of computers was steady in the background, and the scent of fresh coffee drifted from the break room. I was new, still figuring out where the printer was, still fumbling with the copier like it was some ancient artifact. That's when she walked in. My boss. She carried herself in a way that made everyone around her seem smaller. Not because she was unkind, but because her presence filled the space so naturally. She wore a tailored blouse, light gray, tucked neatly into a black skirt, the kind of outfit that said, "I know exactly who I am and what I'm doing." But it wasn't just her clothes. It was the way she moved, measured, graceful, like she'd been navigating boardrooms and deadlines for half her life. Yet there was also something softer. The faintest tiredness around her eyes, maybe. Or the way her fingers brushed a strand of hair from her cheek as though she wasn't performing for anyone, just being herself for a fleeting second. That's when I realized she wasn't just impressive, she was human. She introduced herself with a polite smile, and I, being every bit the nervous rookie, stood straighter than necessary and said, "It's nice to meet you, ma'am." The moment the word left my mouth, I knew I'd messed up. She froze, not angrily, not even sternly. Just paused. Her eyes, sharp yet calm, lifted to mine. And then, after a beat, she laughed. Not a cruel laugh, not sharp or dismissive, but a genuine, warm laugh that seemed to ripple through the silence of the office and make it feel alive. "Don't call me ma'am again," she said, her tone teasing, yet edged with sincerity. Her voice, low, steady, a little husky, seemed to linger in my ears long after she stopped speaking. I tried to smile, tried to laugh it off, but my face betrayed me. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck, all the way to my ears. She must have noticed, because her smile softened, like she was letting me off the hook. Still, the damage was done. That laugh, that playful correction, stuck with me. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. There was confidence there, but also a kind of vulnerability. A desire not to be seen as distant or untouchable. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of emails and orientation forms, but I kept catching myself replaying that moment. Her laugh. Her words. The slight curve of her lips when she smiled. It should have been nothing, just a simple correction to a rookie's formality. But deep down, I knew it was something else. A line had been drawn, not just between boss and employee, but between formality and familiarity. And I couldn't help wondering, even then, what would happen if I dared to step across it. It was a few days later when I realized she hadn't forgotten what I said. The office was nearly empty that evening. The storm outside had painted the windows with long streaks of rain, and the steady tapping of drops against the glass filled the silence. Most of the overhead lights were off, leaving only the warm glow of our desk lamps. It made the office feel smaller, almost like we were sharing a secret space instead of just working late. I was typing up a report, half-focused, when I caught myself. My mouth opened, and the word nearly slipped out again, "ma'am." I stopped short, swallowing the sound before it betrayed me. But she noticed. Of course she noticed. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossing casually over her chest. A slow smile spread across her face, one eyebrow lifting ever so slightly. "You almost said it again," she teased, her voice carrying just enough playfulness to make my stomach twist. I tried to laugh it off, but it came out awkward, clumsy. "Force of habit," I muttered, eyes fixed on my screen. Her chair creaked as she leaned forward, resting her elbows on the edge of my desk. The movement brought her just a little closer, close enough that I caught the faint, steady trace of her perfume. Something floral, subtle, not overwhelming. The kind of scent that doesn't demand attention but quietly lingers. "Habit," she repeated, tapping her fingers against a file. "You're too young to have habits that old-fashioned." Her tone wasn't unkind, but her eyes, sharp, curious, searched mine, as though she was studying me, testing me. I tried to respond, but then she handed me a document, sliding it across the desk. My hand reached out at the same time as hers, and for a fraction of a second, our fingers touched. It wasn't much. Just a brush of skin. But it was enough. Her hand was cool, her nails neat and pale against the edge of the paper. The contact lasted no more than a heartbeat, yet something in me reacted as though it had been longer. I pulled back too quickly, fumbling with the file like it was heavier than it should have been. She didn't say anything about it, didn't even look down at our hands. But there was the faintest shift in her smile, a tiny curve that told me she noticed, she just wasn't going to make it easy for me. That was the moment I understood something. This wasn't just about a word. It was an unspoken challenge. She was daring me to stop hiding behind formality, to treat her not as some untouchable figure, but as a person. The rain kept falling, the office remained quiet, and the air between us grew heavier, not uncomfortable, but charged. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination running wild. Still, when I finally left that night, her laughter echoed in my head again, the same as it had that first morning. Only this time, it felt different. More dangerous. The company retreat was supposed to be all about team bonding, icebreaker games, long workshops, and polite laughter over catered dinners. To me, it felt like a high school field trip for adults and business casual. Everyone else seemed to enjoy it, though. The main lounge buzzed with conversation, glasses clinking, coworkers swapping stories that blurred together. But I slipped away after a while, the noise too much. That's when I found her. She was sitting alone on the porch outside, a half-full glass of wine in her hand. The countryside air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and wet grass. The wooden boards beneath my shoes creaked as I stepped out, but she didn't turn right away. She was looking out into the dark trees, her posture relaxed, but not entirely. Almost like she'd been holding herself too tightly all day and was finally letting the weight slip off her shoulders. I hesitated. She wasn't just my boss, she was her. The woman whose laughter had embarrassed me days earlier, the one whose smallest smile could still undo me without trying. But something about the way she sat there, quiet and alone, made me take the seat beside her. She glanced at me then, eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "Escaping the crowd too?" she asked, her voice low, touched with humor but faintly tired. "Something like that," I said. "Too many name games for one night." She laughed under her breath, but it wasn't the same laugh from before. This one was gentler, almost fragile. She swirled the wine in her glass before speaking again. "You know, when you called me ma'am the other day, I wasn't just teasing. It made me feel—" She paused, searching for the word. "Old." Her tone was steady, but the way she avoided my eyes gave her away. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch for a moment. The night air wrapped around us, cool and quiet, filled only by the distant hum of voices inside. "I didn't mean it like that," I said softly. "It was respect. Nothing more." Finally, she looked at me, and there it was, the vulnerability she usually kept hidden. A flicker of doubt, of weariness. "Respect is good," she said quietly. "But sometimes respect feels like distance. Like being put on a pedestal I never asked for." Her words sank into me, deeper than I expected. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and I noticed a faint tremble in her hand. Not much, just enough to make my chest tighten. For all her strength, all her poise, there was a part of her that carried fears just like anyone else. I didn't reach out. I didn't dare. But my eyes stayed on hers a moment longer than they should have. And when she didn't look away, I felt something shift between us, quiet, unspoken, but undeniable. That night, I went to bed hearing her words echoing in my head. Not the ones about age, but the ones hidden beneath them. She didn't want to be seen as distant. She wanted to be seen, truly seen. And for the first time, I realized how much I wanted to be the one to do it. The office had a different kind of silence at night. Not the quiet of a fresh morning, full of potential, but the heavy hush of exhaustion. Papers were scattered across my desk, half-empty coffee cups lined the corner, and the blue glow of our screens seemed harsher against the darkness around us. She was still working too. Of course she was. That was the thing about her, she didn't stop. Even when the others packed up, laughing on their way out, she stayed behind, shoulders squared, pen in hand, fighting her way through one more file, one more problem. I watched her rub her temples, eyes closed for a moment as though she was holding back the weight of the entire day. For once, she didn't look untouchable. She just looked tired. Human. Without thinking, I stood and went to the small office kitchen. The smell of burnt coffee lingered in the air, but I managed to pour what was left into a clean mug and brought it back to her. "Here," I said quietly, setting it down beside her stack of papers. She blinked, surprised, then looked up at me. Her eyes softened as she reached for the cup, and as she took it from my hand, her fingers brushed against mine. Not an accident this time, not hurried. The touch was brief, but it lingered, deliberate enough to leave me standing there longer than I should have. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Almost a whisper. I nodded, suddenly too aware of my own heartbeat, and moved to sit back at my desk. But she stopped me. "Stay," she murmured, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. I hesitated, then sat down. The chair was close, closer than I expected. Our shoulders touched lightly as we leaned over the same pile of files, the warmth of her arm brushing against mine. Neither of us moved away. The quiet stretched between us, but it wasn't awkward. It was charged. The kind of silence that feels fuller than words. I could hear the scratch of her pen, the faint hum of the lights, and underneath it all, the rhythm of her breathing. At one point she sighed, setting her pen down. "You know," she said, tilting her head toward me, "you don't have to work this late. Most people your age would be out with friends right now." I smiled faintly. Maybe I'm not like most people. That earned me a glance, brief, curious, but lingering just long enough to leave me restless. She looked back at the papers then, but something had changed. Sitting beside her, shoulder to shoulder, it didn't feel like boss and employee anymore. It felt like two people who had quietly, unknowingly crossed a line neither of us was ready to name. That night, when I finally left the office, my arm still felt warm where hers had touched it. And I knew, without question, that something between us had shifted. Gently, but undeniably. The dinner wasn't supposed to feel different. It was just business, an after-hours meeting with a client who had cancelled at the last minute. That left the two of us sitting across from each other in a quiet restaurant, half the tables empty, the low murmur of conversation around us barely rising above the clink of cutlery. She looked different outside the office. Her blazer was draped neatly over the back of her chair, leaving her in a simple navy blouse that somehow made her seem softer. The low light of the candles on the table caught the lines at the corners of her eyes, the ones she usually tried to hide beneath composure. They didn't make her look old. They made her look real. We ordered, we ate, we talked. At first, it was safe: work deadlines, mutual frustrations with company policies, little jokes about office quirks. But somewhere between the main course and dessert, the conversation shifted. "You know what I admire about you?" I said before I could think better of it. Her eyes lifted, steady, waiting. You carry so much responsibility, pressure. But you never let it crush you. You don't break." For a moment, she didn't respond. She swirled her wine glass slowly, her gaze dropping to the tablecloth. Then she looked back at me, her expression softer than I'd ever seen. "You think I don't break?" Her voice was quiet, almost fragile. "You don't realize how much I admire you, too. Your honesty. Your energy. You remind me of things I thought I'd lost." The words landed between us like a confession neither of us had intended to give. My chest tightened. Her eyes held mine, and for a suspended moment, the world around us fell away. Her knee brushed against mine under the table. It might have been an accident, but she didn't move it back. Neither did I. The warmth of that small touch spread through me, setting my pulse racing in a way no wine could explain. The silence stretched, heavy and electric. I wanted to say something more, something I shouldn't. The words hovered on my tongue, aching to break free. But she cleared her throat gently, the sound like a wall being rebuilt brick by brick. She smiled, faint but careful, and leaned back in her chair. "We should get the check," she said, her tone lighter, steadier, as though nothing had happened. I nodded, though my heart was still caught in that suspended moment. The rest of the night passed in polite conversation, laughter that felt practiced, safe. But beneath it all, I couldn't forget what almost happened, the near confession that hung in the air, unspoken but undeniable. When we parted ways outside the restaurant, she gave me a simple nod, her hand brushing my arm briefly as she said goodnight. Just enough to remind me, the line between us was thinner than ever. And I couldn't help but wonder how much longer it would hold. It happened on a day when everything seemed to go wrong. Deadlines slipped, clients pushed back, and whispers spread around the office about one of her tough decisions. She carried it all on her shoulders, as she always did, but I could see the weight pressing harder this time. When most people had gone home, her office door stayed closed, the blinds drawn. The usual glow of confidence that seemed to follow her had dimmed. I hesitated at first, telling myself it wasn't my place, that she probably wanted to be alone. But something in me wouldn't let me walk past. I knocked lightly and waited. Her voice came, soft but unsteady. "Come in." The room was dim, lit only by a desk lamp. Papers were spread everywhere, but she wasn't working. She was sitting back in her chair, arms crossed as though she was holding herself together. When she looked up at me, her eyes glistened faintly. Not tears exactly, but close enough that my chest tightened. "Rough day," I said gently. She gave a faint laugh, but it cracked at the edges. "That obvious?" I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. For a moment I didn't know what to do, how close to stand, whether to say anything more. She wasn't my boss in that moment, not really. She was just a woman trying not to fall apart. "I don't think anyone sees how much this costs you," I said finally. Her gaze flickered to mine, and something inside her seemed to falter. She set her pen down, slowly, as though she couldn't hold it anymore. "Sometimes," she whispered, "I wonder why I keep fighting so hard. And then I realize, it's because if I stop, no one else will." The words were steady, but her voice wavered, and before I could think, I took a step closer. She didn't move away. Her eyes dropped for a moment, and then she leaned forward, resting her forehead lightly against my chest. The contact was so unexpected I froze. Her hair brushed my chin, her cheek warmed through the thin fabric of my shirt. My hands hovered uncertainly in the air before I let them fall, carefully wrapping around her. Not tight, not possessive, just enough to let her know she wasn't alone. Her breathing slowed, steadied, and I felt the faint rhythm of it against me. For a long moment neither of us spoke. The only sound was the muted hum of the lamp and the faint rush of traffic far below. Then, in the quiet, she whispered words that left me standing completely still. "You make me forget the years between us." I felt my pulse surge, every thought scattering at once. I wanted to answer, but I couldn't trust my voice. All I could do was hold her a little closer, afraid that if I let go, the moment would vanish like it had never happened. But it had happened. And nothing could make it ordinary again. The rooftop was quiet that night. A cool breeze swept across the city, carrying with it the faint hum of traffic and the distant notes of music from a bar somewhere below. I hadn't planned to find her there, it just happened. After another long day, I pushed open the heavy door to the roof and saw her standing near the railing, her silhouette outlined by the glow of the skyline. For a moment I just watched her. The city lights reflected in her hair, turning dark strands into silver. She looked steady, composed, the way she always did in front of others. But there was something in her posture, the way her shoulders sloped, the way her hands rested against the cool metal railing, that told me she wasn't as sure as she looked. I walked over quietly, and when she turned to face me, her smile was small but real. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. Not really, I admitted. Thought some air might help. We stood side by side for a while, saying nothing. The silence wasn't heavy this time. It was calm, almost soothing, like we both knew words would come when they needed to. Finally, she exhaled, her breath visible in the cool night air. Do you ever wonder what people would say? Her voice was low, almost lost in the wind. If they saw us like this? If they knew how close we've become? I looked at her then, really looked. The woman who carried herself with such certainty at work, who never let anyone see her doubts, was admitting them to me. And I realized, this wasn't just about age. It wasn't about titles or roles. It was about the fear of stepping into something unknown, something that couldn't be explained to anyone else. Yeah, I said softly. I do wonder. She turned her face toward me, waiting. But I also know I don't care. The words came out steady, surprising even me with their clarity. People will always talk. They'll always judge. But they don't get to decide what matters to me. You do. Her eyes glistened in the city glow, and for the first time, she didn't look away. She didn't deflect with a joke, or rebuild her wall with a polished smile. Instead, she let the silence hang there, honest and unguarded. Then she did something that caught me completely off guard. She reached for my hand. Her fingers slid into mine slowly, deliberately. Warm against the cool night, steady against the uncertainty between us. My chest tightened, and I closed my hand around hers, feeling the quiet strength of that choice settle into me. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. The closeness, the weight of her hand in mine, the steady rhythm of her breathing beside me, it was more than enough. For the first time since that awkward morning when I called her Ma'am, I felt the space between us disappear completely. We weren't boss and employee anymore. We weren't 25 and 42. We were just two people, standing together on a rooftop, choosing each other anyway. And in that stillness I knew, we always would.